Hello, and welcome to another Scotsway podcast. And this is part 2 of our Edinburgh Fringe Festival Specials. In a moment, I'll be talking to David Banks and Sadiq Ali about their show Stuntman. I'll be talking to Mervyn Stutter about the Pick of the Fringe, the 30th anniversary of the Pick of the Fringe, and also Olivia, Zerphy and Sam Ryder from the Voloz Theatre Company to hear about the life sporadic of Jess Wildgoose. But before you hear from them, I caught up with Charlie Vero Martin to hear all about the show Super. I'm joined by Charlie Vero Martin to talk about Super, which is at this year's Fringe. Hello, Charlie.
Hello.
So what can you tell us? I'm very well, thanks. I'm very well. Yes. I'm really interested to talk to you about Super because it sounds like my kind of thing. So what can you tell us about it?
So it's a two-hander written by Matt Radway, who's also directing it. And it's about a couple, I guess, who play Batman and Catwoman on Hollywood Boulevard and have since grown apart. My character, Catherine, has now moved across the country and doesn't speak to Batman anymore. And we're both being interviewed separately about our mutual friend who played Robin, who has now become quite a famous actor. So you get both sides of the story as to what happened those years ago. And it's a lot about fame and friendship and mainly failure.
Because reading about it, it's not that you're playing the actual characters of Batman and Catwoman. It's people in Hollywood Boulevard, which I didn't know about this thing. Can you tell us a bit about the kind of background and inspiration to the characters?
Yeah, so it's quite a popular thing in Hollywood Boulevard. In a similar way to if you ever go to Trafalgar Square or Times Square in New York, where people dress up as characters and you can get your photograph taken with them and things, but I think it's on a whole other level at Hollywood Boulevard. And Matt, who wrote the play, he actually went out to LA and interviewed a lot of people who do this job, and he'd been in touch with some of them beforehand and since, and they have fascinating lives. Some of them it's quite a rough job. Like a lot of them end up homeless. And in this play, the two characters, my character comes over from Scotland. She wants to be an actress. She meets this guy who's like, "Oh, move in with me. Like, I'll help you out." And it's all very exciting and very fun. And then it kind of turns sour, and she realizes that she needs to get out, and she leaves. And in that time, she's left and found another career. But the guy that she was in the relationship with, she moved in, Batman, he's continued to stay. And in some ways he gets quite obsessive about Batman.
Right.
And really connects with, I feel like I'm Batman, and whereas my character didn't want to get sucked into that. So yeah, it's interesting. I think you get a lot of characters, I think, doing this job on Hollywood Boulevard. And Rick / Batman, I think his character embodies a lot of that.
It sounds fascinating. I mean, the whole kind of premise sounds fascinating. I'd known that there was people pretending to be vigilantes, but doing it as a kind of tourists. Yeah, sounds so interesting. And you mentioned the kind of themes behind it, fame and then failure as well. Expand a little bit more on that. So these are people who go to Hollywood to try and make it big, as you say, to try and get, it seems that everyone almost in Los Angeles is trying to it's a kind of commentary on that as well, how people are kind of promised a lot and then,
Yeah, it's because pretty much everyone out there, and the three main characters, well, there's only two characters in the play, and there's one character called Stephen that we refer to but never see. All three of us go out there wanting to become famous actors and take up this job on Hollywood Boulevard to make money, and only one of them really makes it, the one that we don't see.
Yeah.
And so it's looking at people's different outlooks on what is success. Your view of success can change.
Mhm.
Your view of success can be quite often decided upon by others rather than yourself, and comparison is such a difficult thing in this industry as well. So my character has kind of moved on and found a new dream, um, without giving too much away at the end of the play. Um, Whereas Rick's character, he's still holding on to his original dream, and one of the things I really like about this play is that I don't think any one character is right. I don't think any one character is particularly more likable than another. Like, they're all very flawed
Mhm.
characters, but it's a very real, especially for me at this point in my life and my career, like, these are conversations I'm having all the time with people. Some people think, oh no, you can't give up. And some people say, oh no, it's not giving up. It's, being realistic, or it's finding a new dream. And it's a hard conversation for, I think, a lot of people in our industry to have. And it's a whole play about it. in a very comical, almost slightly abstract way. But I think for a lot of people, they'll come to it thinking, oh, this is weird. I know nothing about playing Batman on Hollywood Boulevard. But then when you watch it, so much of it feels so real and so familiar to all of us,
Mhm.
because it's that human idea of what we feel like our lives should be about, and what we consider to be success, and what we consider to be our own points of failure as well.
Exactly. I think it's something that everyone will be able to relate to in some way, because to differing degrees, you've all maybe got dreams, whether it's sport or whether it's, I
Mm,
speak to a lot of musicians and writers and stuff, and there's that conversation: do I give it another 10 years, or do I have a plan? And often people do, but often people don't. So I think, I think it's really interesting, because having the title Super and having the two central characters, I would imagine that you're going to get people who go, oh yeah, there's a superhero play on, let's go and see that, which is great, because once they're in, they're going to realize that actually there's more depth going on than maybe they first
mm,
thought. Is that the kind of
yeah.
thing that drew you to it, the kind of relatability, if you like?
Yeah, definitely. And Matt Radway, who has written the play and has directed it, we've known each other for a very long time. For about 9 years. We met when I moved to London. So we've worked together quite a bit and supported each other throughout our careers. And,
Right.
and he's the person that I've had this conversation with probably most. And so when he told me about the play, I knew he was going to have handled it really, really well. And he's very, very funny, very dark humor as well. And the two parts were just really nicely written. And even in terms of reflection of superheroes themselves are very flawed people.
Yeah.
Um, and our ideas of, oh yeah, they save people, but they also beat a lot of people up and make a lot of unusual choices, and sometimes maybe looking up to those people as an idea of who your heroes are, and what success is also a little bit questionable.
Absolutely.
Um, so there is definitely enough in it for superhero fans. He's managed to weave in a few Batman quotes and things like that. Um, but I really like that those two things um, sort of come in together.
Did you have the conversation? See all those chats that we've been having over the years? It's now part of a play. Was that? I've been making mental notes all the time, and here's the script, and it's for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he wrote the part for me. I think in a very original first draft, it was a one-man play,
Right.
and then he realized that he needed Catherine's point of view, because that's the other interesting point of it, that these two characters were technically married, and our view of what our relationship was and why that ended is also very different, and you get two different sides of the story. So he wrote the part because he felt he needed to hear her side of the story, but then also it became a good way of showing a different way of looking at success and failure as well. Although I was a little bit, wait, can I swear on this?
Yes.
Okay. I was a little bit concerned when he said, "Oh, I've written this part and I think it would be great for you that I've written it for you." And I read the first draft and she was a total bitch. I just thought, how dare you? Um, but she is actually quite a sympathetic character. Um, but yeah, there's definitely some things in the play that we've said to each other, or um, we've related to very hard.
I've never thought about that, but when someone says, "Oh, I've written this part for you," your initial thing is, "Oh, that's fantastic." But then when you get to read it, there could be things in that part go,
Yeah.
"You really think of me? What's going on?"
I think in his defense and in my defense, I think he thought, on paper this person sounds awful, but he's like, but when you're saying it, they'll be sympathetic, and I'm like, okay.
And you mentioned that there's comedy in it. So could you talk? How does that fit into it? Because it does sound, from what you're saying, quite a melancholy story.
I mean, there's always going to be a certain amount of entertainment when you've got two people dressed as Batman and Catwoman on
That's true.
stage, trying to be very. And a lot of the comedy comes from that, especially from Rick's character. You know, he's being extremely earnest about how he believes he's going to be successful and everything, and like how everybody knows who he is, and he's dressed like Batman, and he's obviously a bit delusional, and so some of the stuff he comes away with is um just funny in itself from that reason. And then my character, she's written a bit more witty, um and a bit more dry, and I'd say the humor is pretty dark and pretty dry. uh he's very good at, so we met on a comedy writing course, so comedies is what we've generally worked on, and we both have a very similar outlook on how um drama should be written and performed. Is that, well, so there's a Gene Wilder quote I really love, which is, he says, approach comedy like it's drama and drama like it's comedy. And that's, I think, what Matt has done here. So even though these people's lives are quite sad and what they're talking about is sometimes quite sad, it's been approached in, I think, a very human way. And I think in this, maybe also Scottish sense of humor often is talking about quite bleak things in a humorous way. And that's how he writes as well. It's bleak, but that's what makes it funny.
And as you say, just the thing of having two people costumed, having these serious conversations, I can imagine that as well. And we should tell people where it's on and when it's on, so that they can come along, and how they can get tickets as well.
Yeah, so it's on at 1:45 at the Pleasance Courtyard in the Cellar. We start on the 2nd of August. We're on till the 28th. We're not on the 14th. But otherwise, we're there every day. You can get tickets either on the Ed Fringe website or the Pleasance website, or at the Pleasance or Ed Fringe box office.
And what's your own history with the Fringe? You know, I'm interested particularly in doing a full run like this and how intense that is, because it seems to me it must be.
Well, I'm a crazy person because I'm doing a full run of this play, and I'm also doing a full run of my own solo comedy show.
Well, you must tell people where they can see that as well.
So my solo show, it's a one-woman character comedy, sketch comedy show called Picnic, Charlie Vero Martin Picnic, and it's on at 6:55 at Underbelly in the Cowgate. the 3rd till the 27th, not the 14th. And yeah, I'm doing two shows, 2 full runs. The other show is I've written and done everything myself. But again, it's a very silly comedy show with a few dark twists in it as well. And Matt's helped me out a little bit with that show. So this will be my 4th solo show at the Edinburgh Fringe. But I've not been back since pre-pandemic. And prior to that, I've done a bunch of full-length runs with various improv groups I've been with, and a play years ago when I was at uni. But it'll be my first time at the Edinburgh Fringe with a play in this capacity for a full run, and certainly my first time doing 2 quite meaty shows. I'll sleep in September.
Yes, I was going to say, I'd love to talk to you the first day of September and see how you're holding them together.
Yeah.
Well, Charlie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, and all the best with everything you're doing at the Fringe.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm now joined by David Banks and Sadiq Ali to talk about Stuntman. Hello, David and Sadiq.
Hi. Hi, thanks for having us on. Looking forward to talking about the show.
It's a pleasure. So what should people expect from Stuntman?
A little bit of everything. And let me go into a little bit more details. So let's set the tone for this. I think at its core, it's about if you ever enjoyed watching action movies, but felt a little bit weird about it. So the kind of things that you can expect in it, in a pure performance setting, is we've got little bits of circus, little bits of dance, we've got some acting, we've got some personal stories, we die a lot, we pretend to be lots of different people, John Wick, John McClane, John Rambo, all the action Johns throughout the show. And we use that as our way of kind of analysing our journey in relationship to masculinity.
And violence.
And violence.
And violence.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fun, silly, clown-like, absurd violence. There's also some quite nice fight choreography that we've worked with a few different people to actually not look like we're clowning all the time, which is nice. So obviously, as David said, it's a piece about action films, about growing up with action films and watching fighting, watching violence. How does that influence us? How does that make us look at the world outside? But then we put it through the lens of that by actually getting to be the action heroes, getting to be those characters. And I came on board a little bit later to start to explore what my character's journey in that was. Because David started this by going, if you like watching action films, I'm like, I never did like watching action films. I still don't really like watching action films.
Which is exactly what the show needed. So the original version of this, it's a distant memory now, but you could call it the pound shop version, which is, here's 100 quid, boys and girls, see what you can do. So we head to the pound shop, got some guns, told some stories, and it went really well. And so we had an opportunity not just to bring the show back to life, but to be like, right, okay, well, if we did have a bit of money, if we did have our choice, and we use that as a starting point, what does the show look like if we create it again? And so we found Sadiq, and he was perfect. Sadiq, as a theatre maker himself, had his cracking hit show last year at the Fringe. We're like, he's absolutely perfect. So we tore it apart. We had some bits that worked from the last bit, but we remade the whole thing. And it's kind of how me and Sadiq's journeys are similar but different, where they clash and where they break apart.
And it's fun and it's entertaining and it's feisty and at some points it's camp because I'm here and that's what I've brought. And it's a joy, but it's also tender and sensitive. And I think it's worth saying, it's more than worth saying, that we're part of the Made in Scotland showcase this year. So that means that, without a doubt, if you buy a ticket to this show, you're going to see something of quality. You're going to see something that is of Scotland's finest performance. And so that's not something I'm saying out of ego. The fact that we're part of this showcase means that this is a ticket that's worth buying. And I think that's important when we look at Fringe, because Fringe is overwhelming in the choice. But if you're going to go to something that's part of a showcase are part of the equivalent. There's Made in Scotland, which is us, or Horizon, or something. You're going to see something that's interesting. You're going to be able to take something away from it, whether it's a kind of performance you go to see in your normal life or not. I think that's really special to be a part of that this year.
And even them, and what we've been saying from the start is this show brings in new audiences, not just let's sit in a boardroom, we know nothing about other groups or working class culture, other groups of people, and we say, oh yes, this will bring in new audience. We actually have already brought in new audiences. Yeah. So when we were touring Scotland, we had Narcotics Anonymous groups come in, men's groups come in. We had my ginormous family all coming in Aberdeen.
They are ginormous.
There's a considerable amount of them, you know. So what you actually get from that, in terms of even from an audience vibe and an audience perspective, I think a show's a lot more fun when someone's auntie's trying to film it. I think a show's a lot more fun when someone doesn't go to the theatre all the time and they walk out to get a pint and come back in. You know, like that's what it's all about.
I think what you're saying, David, is it's quite accessible.
Yeah.
As a performance and as a storytelling mode, because we're looking at action films, we're looking at fun, we're looking at movies, and then we go into theatre and dance and circus, and we start to like unpick those layers, but it's actually really accessible. You don't need to have a degree to watch this, and you'll still enjoy it. Which I think sometimes at the Fringe, I'm like, I really like this, but it's very complicated.
Yeah.
It's nuance in this show, but it's also just, you can just enjoy it.
And we've got so many backgrounds between us as well, and so many people involved. We've got Michaela on the lights, we've got Rachel doing costume and set, we've got Peter Lannan, who's the director and was one of the original creators of the original version, coming in. We've got Chris, who is the greatest tech that ever lived.
And also very good with sound.
Very good with sound.
You can definitely find the full names on the program
we got
list.
Kim, we got Rishi. It's quite wild how big the team is. We had people jumping in just for a day. We've had people from the start, seeing all the developments. So we really use everyone's skill set.
It's a very devised piece. Like, although we tell stories about our own journeys, there's been a lot of collaborators that have brought a lot of depth to both the design and the soundscape, like the whole aesthetic of the work itself, which I think is quite unique.
And we have a real balance, gender balance, in terms of who we have in the room as well, which was really important. So the show is accessible to however people identify. So we have that experiences in the room, viewing the material, seeing how it reads. And it just rolls all together into this show, which is class.
And what do you two enjoy most about the show, actually being, performing it?
There's a few different bits. I'm a circus artist. Last year I did the Edinburgh Fringe with a show called The Chosen Haram, which was at Summer Hall, and we're at Summer Hall again with Stuntman, so I'm very much looking forward to being in the same place and feeling that vibe for the month. But I normally work with poles, I normally don't speak on stage, definitely don't do fight scenes. So in terms of what I'm doing in this show, it's all kind of new to me. I'm using my stories, I'm using my words, I'm using my movement. And like I said before, I get to kill myself, and it's actually really funny. And I like that. So.
For me, at that pandemic that hit us all hard, we hit this point about halfway through it where I had multiple surgeries. I'd broken my teeth, I had my knee fixed, I had a lot of family members die in the pandemic, I had no money left, and I was sitting on a sofa feeling like everything's over, and I just focused ahead. I was like, this is coming, this is coming, this is coming, this is coming. So I think back to that darker period, and this is something, knowing that I was going to do this drives me forward, knowing that people in my family and my friends can come, and the backgrounds that me and Sadiq are from, you don't see many people from our backgrounds at the Fringe. We could never have went to the Fringe where, say, some family member hired out the venue for us.
Yeah.
We don't have a trust fund, we don't have inheritance, no one bought us our flat. We couldn't take that risk.
Not yet.
So we had to wait to that point till we had something, and we had people backing us and people saying this is quality. So I think a lot of people, when I speak to them about, especially when they're bringing their Fringe show or come to the Fringe, they downplay it a bit. you know, being like, oh, it's just a Fringe, it's just no, it's more than that. Like, we're here on Made in Scotland funding. That comes out of taxpayers' pockets, you know, to an extent. Like, so we got to go there and represent.
Or is it lottery funding?
Lottery funding, gamblers' pockets, whatever it is. But you got to find those deep reasons to really push yourself forward. And as much as we've got the kind of like the light-hearted and the things that really drive the show, the reality is there's a lot of darker themes in this as well. If you're under the age of 50 and you're a man in the UK, you're most likely to die by killing yourself under 50. You know, the amount of people that can't talk about their problems, and we do that in the show. Every time we try and talk to each other, we end up killing each other. Because there's this whole narrative in the kind of, say, traditional route through masculinity that if anyone's sad that they can't talk. Like, I don't know how many times in your life you've maybe said something to your friend, oh, you know, feeling down, and you're like, do you want to go to the pub? So it's like, at what point does that chip away? At what point does that change your identity? And then we, through the lens that certainly with me growing up in quite a violent environment, going through boxing, competing as an MMA fighter and things like that, to get that moment of relief, to be the good guy, it meant that the answer was violence. It was never talking about it.
Yeah.
And that's truly from your background. I wanted to touch on that there. And that's where a lot of the stories for David comes from, is the fact that he actually does come from a fighting background. His upbringing was in boxing, was in MMA. And then I come into the room and I'm very much the opposite end of the spectrum. I wanted to be a dancer, I wanted to be a singer, I wanted to be on stage in a very different way than in a ring. And then we look at these two characters and how they meet in the middle and support each other and try to turn away and put their masks on, but then try to help each other take their masks off. And I think we've got a really nice balance of fun, clown, and tender. And
also kind of like in terms of bringing our own sexualities into it, like as a queer man looking back at some of these action movies, particularly like the 80s and things like that, really finding the joy in things like Bonnie Tyler, I Need a Hero, that super muscular, and you realize that like the queer aspects of action movies have always been there, particularly in the 70s and 80s, and this show couldn't have been made, the show would not have been the same if it wasn't Sadiq and I in it. Because the reality is, and we joke about this already, that if we grew up posh, we'd both be dancers, so you'd have a completely different show.
That's, I mean, that idea of balance, that's what I was going to say. It sounds like the perfect balance in all sorts of ways, because at the very beginning you said you grew up with action movies, and Sadiq, you didn't and still kind of don't. So to have those two sides, that seems to be vital to what you've produced. It's nice. Yeah, it allows us to have polars and meet in the middle.
And Sadiq literally looks like an action hero. The man's absolutely shredded. He's quite tall, he's strong, he's got good teeth, you know, like...
but my clothes stay on.
You see. You're trying to sell tickets here, come on.
Mostly.
And you know, you said that you've already had this on tour, and what have been audience reactions? What's been the kind of feedback?
Yeah, we've done a little a Scottish tour already, so we've done some of the Central Belt, and then we wanted to make sure we took it a bit rural, so we've gone to some of the Highlands and Islands, we've done Skye and Mull, and we've really been able to do from theatre spaces that are full and sold out to village halls with only 15 locals there in, and so we've had a really nice varied like kind of audience base so far. Everyone's enjoyed it. Everyone's had a really good time. Some people have had a little cry at the end, and that makes me, I like it when people cry. I feel like we've touched your heart. If I
cry at the end quite often.
Sometimes you're genuinely crying at the end.
Yeah.
But it's out of a bit of beauty and about tenderness. And yeah, some people walk away going, that was really good fun. Some people walk away going, wow, that was really deep and meaningful. And no one's walked away going, that was rubbish, but they probably wouldn't say that to your face, would they?
It really opens up the floor for people talking to us afterwards. Say particularly like mates or certain family members, because they're the people you end up speaking to the most after the show. That's the reality. Hearing them opening up about certain things is, I hate using the word interesting, it's such a cop-out for a word, but it's really affirming for the work.
Well done on your thesaurus.
Thank you.
And
we are I'm just going to hammer it home because I'm not sure if we're at Summer Hall.
Yes,
at
I'm going to ask that.
5:30 almost every day throughout August. The only day that we don't do is Monday. So we have one day off of battering the hell out of each other for an entire month. So any day except for a Monday, 5:30 at Summer Hall.
Yeah.
And tickets just on Fringe website, that kind of
On Fringe website or tickets at the venue itself. Summer Hall has a box office. We're in the Tech Cube, which is right out the front. You can see it as you go up to the venue. It's the brand new space called Tech Cube. So yeah, you can get your tickets online on the Fringe website or at the venue itself, but either way, get your tickets.
Yeah, simplest way to find it is just open the search engine and type Summer Hall Stuntman.
Yeah.
Top result.
Yeah, fantastic.
And top show.
It genuinely does sound like a top show because, you know, I was a bit of a fan of action movies. In fact, just last night I was flicking through the telly and Lethal Weapon 2 was on, and I'd just forgotten all about the mullets and the cowboy boots and the kind of...
Well, I got the mullet
poor-
going, but
Yeah,
we were saying at the start that you really like Die Hard. You'll be happy to know, I feel that this will give away this little tidbit, that one of the kills in it is the yippee-ki-yay. And I shoot Sadiq through a window.
Shoot me through a window, David.
Falls all the way down from the Tokyo Plaza in Die Hard, yeah?
Shoot me through a window, David.
Nakatomi.
We've got the Die Hard kill. We've got it all. We've got samurai swords, we've got Tommy guns, knives, all of it.
Well, if that doesn't get people online and getting tickets, I don't know what will.
I don't know what will.
For the people on the podcast, I just did a backwards fall off a chair. For the ones on YouTube, you're welcome.
Yeah. Go to YouTube and make sure you catch that without a doubt. David and Sadiq, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, and all the very best for Stuntman. It sounds like
Yeah. Are you coming?
I'm going to make it along, definitely. You know?
Well,
you know
I'll say hi to you when you come in.
Thanks very much.
That's your boxer MMA guy, you better.
Well, I've softened a lot over the years, softened a lot.
Don't tell him that now.
Don't tell him that, no, I'm hardest.
Absolutely.
Have a good fringe.
Guys,
And
lovely
Yeah,
meeting you
have a
both.
cracking time. Catch you later.
Take care.
Bye.
I'm joined now by legendary Fringe figure Mervyn Stutter. Hello, Mervyn.
Hi, Alistair.
So tell us all about Mervyn Stutter's pick of the Fringe, although I guess the title kind of says it all.
It does really. But strangely, it doesn't as well, because other people over the years have done lineup shows. Of course they have. And about 3 or 4 years in, somebody tried a pick of the Fringe, which is why it's now called Mervyn Stutter's Pick of the Fringe, because it's not an ego trip. It was just that because other people put on picks of the Fringe and they weren't anything like mine, we had to say to my audience, no, I'm over here.
Yeah.
Don't go to that one. You won't get me. And the reason I say that, and again, it's not an ego thing. It's just that from the day one in 1992, when I decided to do this, I always had a team of reviewers and researchers. So every show that was on had been carefully researched. Now, some lineup shows, they say, oh, we'll get a bunch of comedians and a band. We look at the Scots and where's the 4-star, 5-star comedians? Yeah, we'll pay them. They come on. It's a lineup show. Where you go, 10 quid to get in, bingo. But it's not a bunch of comedians. We got theatre, we got dance, we got circus, we got poetry, storytell, comedians. Yes, of course, 2 a day usually. Music either end, a small. I remember one show we started with a harpist and we ended with a jump jive band. So it's that you start with something sort of taut and meaningful at the front, and then something explosive at the end. Because showbiz, you've got to go out with a bang, no matter what show you're putting on. It seems to me, and also wear a costume. So I've always worn...
People look out for the pink suit. The man in the...
1992, I wore a pink suit because I bought one in Auckland in New Zealand on a wet Sunday afternoon. And I thought that'll be fun. And then I changed it to another one. And the audience went, no, you wear pink. Put the pink back. And I realized it was going to become the logo color and the and the rest of it. So from 1992 See, I was an actor for a long time. Oh, well, I still am with the works around, but I was actually in theatre from that 74 right through in mid-80s. I was, working pretty extensively. And you would go to the Edinburgh Festival, which I did in 1975 as a punter, and I was there in 82. You might know this theatre company in 784.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, well, John McGrath opened up an English company, 784 England, and we brought up a Barry Keefe play called Sus, which is about harassment of black youth by the Met. Hello.
Wow.
Nothing much has changed since 82, has it? Desperate, really. But anyway, so I was there, and I watched how people, work the streets. So if you're a musician, you can go and busk in the street. Young theatre groups, students can run around in costume and hand out flyers, or do a short dance performance, or a cappella singing, or whatever. And you just thought, there's these senior actors walking around feeling rather foolish in costume because their play is rather serious, and this isn't even a suitable way to advertise it. And I thought, well, it's such a shame. And it was the emergent comedy scene of alternative comedy. Yeah. And the posters were bigger than the presents, actually. It wasn't that massive, but it was noisy. And because I looked up in 91 when people kept saying, have you seen anything good, Merv? What do you recommend? I looked up, and it was 45% of the festival was theatre. And I thought, right, that's the point. People think it's getting comedy. And in fact, they were talking about breaking away some of those managements and having an Edinburgh Comedy Festival. It's not. It's actually theatre's the majority. So I made an absolute decision that theatre would be part of it. A nice, controlled, it doesn't have to be complicated, just a calm, reasonably well-resourced space. And this first one, I don't know how long you've been on the Fringe, Alistair, but way back a while. But 1990, I started in 87 in the old cabaret bar, the mahogany dark wood one. It's not there now. And did my solo show for a few years. And then I put the first one with theatre in that old mahogany cabaret bar. Right. You don't have to have a theatre space. It just has to be calm, reasonably well lit, and an attentive audience. And at that time, there was no pre-book going on the internet. So people could be spontaneous, and not many people were working lunchtimes. There's more now. So I chose lunch when the audience would be free, more artists would be free, and therefore acts can meet audience and audience can meet acts, and they could then take a flyer for each of the 7 shows we had as they left and go, well, I'm going to see that one, I want to see that one. It's basically cinematic trailers of 5 minutes each for about 7 shows, but right across the disciplines,
And so the inspiration behind that was that question, what can I go and see? What have you seen that's been good? Because even back then, it was overwhelming for people who maybe just turn up at Edinburgh and don't know what's going on.
Yeah, they thought it was big in 91, 92.
Yeah.
I think it's already past 3,500 this year. Now, we can only make a small dent in that. Sure. But the fact that the audiences turn up in numbers, and we have grown exponentially through the years. And I really like the Pleasance. I've got a sort of an emotional connection to the Pleasance. I've been other places, but, I started at the Pleasance, and you know how it is. But I'm in Pleasance 1. I think it's 320 seats this year. And before COVID, we would do 200, 250 in the week and sell out weekends. And that means a lot of people were very keen to see trailers, snippets, highlights, extracts, call them what you will, but they'll get a 5-minute piece, one little story, very short. Guy said to me in the early days, he came, because I was available then, I sat in the audience in the early days. And as he left, I was saying, thank you for coming and all the usual stuff. And he said, I came yesterday. He said, do you remember, I like comedy? He said, you remember that theatre piece that was on? And I said, yes. He said, I went to see it. Bloody great. And you go, yes. I've actually moved someone out of their comedy zone or their preferred zone into something new. And so I think it's that magazine thing, that you've got a lot of different things on the show, and that people might go, I wasn't sure about dance, but blimey, that's really physical and tough, very street or whatever, or that's come from Taiwan. How beautiful and balletic, So there's so many things you can put into an audience's mind to try, as well as follow their usual menu.
And it's such a lovely thing, because people might balk at giving an hour to something they're not sure of, but 5 minutes, gets to give them that taste, kind of allows them a way in to say, I think this might be something I'm interested in.
Well, Alistair, there's the other thing, which is money. And we've got a cost of living crisis this year. I don't know whether it will affect the audience that comes to the festival. It affects everybody, I think, in their own ways. But in the past, it's been a way of saying, well, I'll pay. Well, I always kept prices low. We started at £3 because I thought, well, I don't know what happens to the budget, but I've got to keep prices low. The only way this works is if a lot of people come. So the acts, when they're on stage, go away saying it's really worth doing Merv Show because there's a lot of people watching and it's much more successful than flyering. A very good way to spend 10 or 15 minutes. So I've always kept it low, but say it was basically it's £15 this year for 90 minutes.
Yes.
£10 an hour, folks, £10 an hour. But at £10 an hour, people will say, yeah, I'll go see that because it might save me £15, £20 a ticket and seeing something I thought was a bit naff. And it wasn't my thing. Even within a discipline they like. They might go to a theatre show and go, oh, I love theatre, but not that. Well, they can say, now I've seen 2 pieces of theatre on Merv's show and I want to see both of them, because the trailers look so good.
And it's not just £10 an hour, but it's the amount of people they're seeing as well in those 90 minutes. You're really getting a lot of value for money there with the different people that you're seeing.
It's been called so many times a snapshot of the Fringe. I've had audience members say, we get off the boat, the plane, the train, whatever. First thing we do, Merv, we come to you and we have a quick look at what's happening in the Fringe this year. And the other version was, just before we leave, we nip down, grab a last hour and a half with you, and then we go home. So people use it for. And the other thing I have to stress, although it's different every day.
Yeah,
it's different every day. So the work we put in is quite, it's quite astonishing, really, because it should be different every day to get as many shows seen. But it means I've had people come back 4 or 5 times a week.
Yeah,
because they get a different one. They might treat it as a snapshot. And then the next day they go, oh, I'm seeing those 2. Use it how you will, but people come back because it's different every day. And we work hard at that,
Well, it's interesting to hear that you've got a team of researchers going out. It's not just word of mouth or people you already know. It's people going out there and seeing what's on the show.
Yeah, and we have to get going because we tried to coming up about the Monday before we start. We start on the Saturday. The Fringe starts Friday, I think.
Yeah.
We always start the Saturday. And we try coming up earlier because we come up on Tuesday night, by afternoon, evening. Stay over the first night, have the first meeting at 9 in the morning, get a plan for the day, and out they go. We have to get 7 shows for Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and all different right through. I think the first day off is like the 17th. Right. Something like that. So we have to really put the pedal down to get 7 quality shows every day from Saturday onwards. So it's hard work to start with. I've got an extra researcher for the first 10 days.
And it'd be good to let people know exactly where it is and what time it's on this year.
Yeah, we're at Pleasance. Everyone should know where the Pleasance is, I think. If you've been coming to the Fringe, it's got the gorgeous courtyard and where everyone likes to be. For their interviews. So much TV is done in the courtyard. It's in Pleasance 1, which is up the stairs as you go in. Turn left, up the stairs, Pleasance 1. And we're on, as I say, lunchtime. This year it's 12:40 to 2:10. 12:40 to 2:10. That's an hour and a half at Pleasance 1. Just say every day for convenience, otherwise it gets complicated. Sure. And what I have got, which I must also mention, if you don't mind, Alistair, it is the 30th year of doing Pick of the Fringe, and it is my 35th year of doing Edinburgh consecutive. Never missed one yet. And on my 20th, I did a big gala show. On my 25th, I did a big gala show. Same again for 30th. So in the Pleasance Grand on Monday, the 21st of August at 2:30, till 4:15, an hour and 45 show. All sorts of wonderful talents will be performing as a big celebration. All the money goes to charity. It goes to a Cape Town charity my wife's involved with. I gave £5,000 to this charity in supporting township kids through school, right? £5,000 in 20th, another £5,000 in the 25th. And really, I mean, quite emotionally thrilling is that on the 30th this year, i.e. the third moment, the money that was invested in a talent show to find talents in the township, and then we paid for training and teaching and classes, and we paid for theatre visits so they could go and watch professional people working. And then the second lot was on musical instruments and studio spaces. This year, my wife Moira is bringing over a troupe of 8 township kids performances, and they're putting on a show at the Counting House.
Right.
So it's like we invested in 20, 25, and in 30, a perfect trilogy. Back come, if you like, the results of that investment. It's not quite that, of course, but it's that rhythm. One of those kids won the competition on my 20th, and she's coming over. She works now for the charity, so that's how it can be. You know, the thing moves through, and it's really lovely that this. And they'll perform at my gala, because it makes sense to say, and these are the kind of kids this gala money goes to support.
Sure.
So it's that for me is very exciting on a very personal level. But for an audience, they can see the results of the investment they made in tickets before, but they have a cracking show. I mean, it's going to be such a good gala. An hour and 45 of top talent. I'm going to do very little. I just want to get the others on.
You just want to have the prime seat in the house to see what's going on. I was going to ask you about your 30th anniversary. Reflecting over the 30 years, are there changes and trends that you've kind of noticed at the festival? Yes,
there's some very distinct ones. The first one is called technology. The internet, as I mentioned earlier, I think I would use the words pre-book. So many people now pre-book. Why shouldn't they? And they have, they have spreadsheets of what they're going to do every day. What it does do is remove spontaneity.
Yeah.
So when I started in '92, I put on there was a Down syndrome company, or in a barren church hall with one sink between about 20 kids and helpers. And they were putting on their show there, and about 5 or 6 people turned up. They did a wonderful silent movie sequence on the Chaplin Park bench thing, the hearts and flowers, the wooing. They did that for 5 minutes on my show. That night, 100 people went.
Wow.
And I know, and it changed their lives. It changed their lives in terms of that festival.
Yeah.
Because the performers suddenly had a great time, because the word of mouth went out from the 100. The 100 speak. People speak, don't they? Word of mouth works.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So why am I telling you that? Changes.
Changes,
So the spontaneity's gone, and the immediacy's gone, and dare I say it, some of the fun's gone.
Right.
It's got quite professional. I mean, there were wonderful moments I mentioned in 1 or 2 articles I've done. I worked with the Doug Anthony All-Stars from you remember them?
Yeah, I do. 3
hugely talented Aussie lads who were quite anarchic and wild, never washed their costumes. I shared a dressing room, kitchen with them. Thank you guys for the smell. It was lovely. And if there was another act that sort of upset them, they'd whip up their audience, they'd march singing into the other bloke's show. Malcolm Hardy, the legendary Malcolm Hardy, got upset when he was done on Prince's Garden in a tent. There's a row of tents, performing tents. He got fed up with this guy who was complaining about the noise from Malcolm's tent. So the next night he got a tractor and drove it straight through his tent. No, you don't get those sorts of events now. And people would work a show in. They would turn up nearly ready and take the first 3 or 4 nights to.
Yeah.
You can't do that now. You've got to hit the ground running. The youth, of course, that turn up are very used to the technology.
Yeah.
They're right up to speed. So people like me are running to catch up. They're right there. And often, instead of saying, let's sit on the theatre show, can we take a 5 minutes, maybe this bit, or we help them if they're a bit stuck. So many of these young companies say, we've got a montage, we're ready. We've rehearsed a montage already. So it's very professional. There's an eye much more on business, touring, for theatre and dance, whatever. And the comedians, of course, are hoping to get some TV. Now, that does lead to a lot of people saying comedy's got a bit safe. So you might put that down as a change as well.
Yeah. And even the balance you spoke about when you started back in '92, did you say 45% was theatre or something?
Yeah, it was. In 1991, I think that was the number.
Yeah, that's probably shifted now in terms of how much comedy is going on, yeah.
Yeah, the other one, of course, I said internet, but the other one, the biggest one, is called the mobile phone.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
We can call anybody anywhere. And what for me now is the best thing for us is the WhatsApp. The WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
My whole team are now on a WhatsApp group, and we can say, bit of a disaster, such and such a company is pulled out for tomorrow. Anybody got a piece of theatre, or anyone got a comedian? Yeah, you've just seen someone, right, book them right away. Get on it, do it. And we can now run so much of our work immediately on WhatsApp. So for that is efficient. The efficiency of that is brilliant. But the mobile phone, I used to take over a house and bring my team into it, and we'd live and work together. And I would run cable from the hall where the phone landline, used to be, over the tops of the doorways, took it into the kitchen. And if they wanted to ring in a crisis or a confirmation, I always said, take plenty of 10p's with you, and they have to queue in the Edinburgh Rain outside a phone box and wait for the bloke in there to break up with his girlfriend or whatever was going on, you know. But, you know, that was slow, but that's all we knew.
Yeah, of course.
But when you think about what we can do now with the mobile and other technologies, the thing is much more efficient.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There's a kind of spontaneity, certainly when I still do this, you kind of walk around and you see what's behind a door that looks interesting and it's got a venue thing, and you will find hidden gems, but I guess that's more unlikely because people are going maybe 4-star, 5-star, and then don't look at anything else that's maybe not even been reviewed yet.
Well, we do. One of the ambitions is to find hidden stuff. We can't do that to start with because I couldn't have the team coming back saying I saw 4 shows yesterday and they were all a bit rough.
Yeah, sure.
I needed success to get going, but once the wheels are turning, they can go out and take risks. And the Free Fringe used to be, the Free Fringe, but there are some top acts now do the Free Fringe for good reasons. Accommodation, landlords are killing the festival slowly. That's my view, and you ought to be careful about that, Edinburgh, because if the acts stay away, the audience stays away because they can't afford the accommodation, we'll all wind up working in Bath. Yeah. I'm just saying. No, but it could be. It could be diminished anyway, if not killed. Yeah. Go on. Sorry.
No, I was going to ask, do you have any acts that particularly stick out over the 30 years that are memorable to you? I mean, probably too many to mention, but just a few.
Well, I'm glad you put it like that, because often I get, you must have had a lot of famous people on. Who have you had? And I'm going, you mean comedians? Because the only people who get famous are people who go on the telly and wind up in your living room. So the theatre companies won't, the puppetry companies, the poets, the dancers, none of that will wind up on your television. But I'm glad you asked that. Memorable ones. When I mentioned the Down Syndrome company, which was fabulous, the one company I really enjoyed was Blind Summit Puppetry Company, and they had a cardboard little fellow. He's only about this high, about a foot or so high, and he was called Moses, and you could see the 3 guys in black working him. And he worked, and the show was called The Table, and he worked on his table, and this was his world, and he showed us around like he would be showing you a suburban house, and it got very philosophical. You know, it's all sort of gods, and suddenly found the edge of the table. I went, oh, there's more, and suddenly got, and this is not just puppetry as we expect it. This is it. So then I will say the League of Gentlemen, because I liked the live show, much as I enjoyed all the prosthetics for what was the town called? Anyway,
Royce and Vasey.
Vasey, yeah. When you see it live, they had a screen, 3 actors, and rubber bands and bits of costume. But the rubber bands twisted their faces into the grotesques. Now, that for me was much more exciting because live theatre is more exciting generally. So I enjoyed their first time. I have to mention last year, the wonderful Toby Goff, who's brought the most extraordinary things over the years to the festival. He's like a kind of theatrical Superman flying around the world. There's a disaster area, let's go and work. The first time I really met Toby and thought, wow, was when he brought over the children from the Sri Lankan tsunami. Right. And they mixed the thing with Pericles, which is basically, that's a sea tragedy. Yeah. And it was done, of course, in the Botanic Gardens. And if you've never ever seen a show in Edinburgh outdoors, you've missed, because the Botanic Gardens was fantastic. It's a great place. Promenade theatre, which is always a joy, isn't it? But watching these kids who just survived, they were traumatized physically, mentally. One had never spoken for a year, and she spoke for the first time in Edinburgh. Now, is that the healing power of theatre? I think perhaps it is. So there was that, Children of the Sea. And last year he brought, which is a mammoth task, he wanted to bring Ballet Freedom from Kiev, Ukraine. But many of the ballet dancers have families, and the women in particular with the babies are gone across the borders into various adjacent countries. And Toby did all the visa work and paperwork to get them back together and brought them over. They played at the EICC, the International Centre. It was an extraordinary ballet, very angular and jerky and sexy, and it wasn't tutus and tights, you know, it was quite different. Wonderful piece of work, enjoyed it enormously. They came on, did their piece. They had 2 songs from the Tiger Lilies.
No, I love them. Yeah, I go and see them regularly if they're on there.
And I sat with my wife Maura, and she said, "The Tiger Lilies are in Edinburgh this year." And I went, "Oh yeah, they are, aren't they?" And I was going to give, when I saw them, I thought, oh yeah, because they were on my show in 1992. So I thought, 30 years, I've got, nearly 30 years, I've got to give them an award. And both companies came on for the awards. I give awards. Sorry, I haven't mentioned it. The last show is always Spirit of the Fringe Awards, which we used to give from 92 onwards, 5 or 6 of these a year for people who had triumphed over adversity, got through and succeeded against the odds, that kind of thing. So Ballet Freedom were on, Tiger Lilies were on. Ballet Freedom did their thing, and then on came Tiger Lilies, and Ballet Freedom were still in the auditorium, and they performed in the auditorium space and up onto the stage and flowed around. So we had the routine they did in the show with the live Tiger Lilies, which, you don't get that normally. It's an absolute one-off. And then when I spoke to the 2 male dancers, I did, when they left the stage, I did choke up, actually. It was a bit going now, actually. Because I knew, we all knew, they knew, they got a special dispensation by the government to come. But when they got back, they were of the age for calling up.
Yeah.
And those boys could have been on the front line within a week of me of saying goodbye to them. They, dare I say, they could be dead by Christmas. It's that sort of, suddenly it was overwhelming for me when they left the stage. Yeah. So that's a massive highlight. The Taiwanese dancers were absolutely gorgeous. They did there's a ceremony of lighted candles in which float along rivers and lakes. They did a dance version of that. We've had the most circus acts, some of the strongest women I've ever seen, because there's all female circus acts now, circuses. There's this extraordinary stuff, and every year I get to learn more about what's going on, and I am astonished by the stuff that we find and put on, or what comes to the festival. Obviously, it's extraordinary. If you've never been to the Fringe Festival before, try it. Come for plan it. Do a long weekend, but next year you might say, "I'll do the week." And come to my show. and I would say that if you do go to the Fringe, or you have been going, and you think it's all the well-known comedians whose posters are all round about town and all that, what your show does is prove that there's so much more going on, and that is where the real interest lies, I think. Yeah, people know the famous comedians are there because they're on panel shows and all the rest of it on television, and good for them, in my book, for coming back to the Fringe and supporting the Fringe, as well as maybe something for their own benefit of trying a new show or whatever. But with Stuart Lee is there regularly, and he consistently pushes new little gems he finds. He's an amazing Fringe person, because he'll say to me, if we pass, I'm not a great friend of Stuart's. We get on, but I haven't sort of had a beer with him or whatever. But he'll say, "Oh, Mervyn, I've just seen this. You ought to check this out." And that's exactly the spirit of Stuart, which is great. Yeah, so it's good they're there. But the free Fringe is really worth a dip, because you can go in and it's indoor busking, ladies and gentlemen. That's all it is. You go in, you watch the show in a space somewhere, and as you leave, you put your money in. They've got card readers now.
They do.
Because obviously we're moving to a cashless society. Discuss. Yeah. But some of the best things I've seen have been at the free Fringe. Sure. You can take a chance. Like you can take a chance. Well, I try to get a good bit of free Fringe on, because it is the reminder of the sort of Fringe I attended first. Yeah. Mervyn, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's been an absolute pleasure. That's a delight, Alistair. I hope I see you at the show someday. I will try my best to come along. I have been in the past, so I've seen you in the pink suit before.
But all the
Yes.
best for the Fringe and also for many more to come.
Bless you, Alistair. Take care, pal.
I'm joined now by Olivia, Zerphy and Sam Rayner from the Voloz collective to talk about the life sporadic of Jess Wildgoose. Hello, Olivia and Sam.
Hello.
So can you tell us about the life sporadic of Jess Wildgoose? Who wants to go first?
Absolutely. Shall I start? So the life sporadic of Jess Wildgoose is a story of a young woman who grew up in Wakini, Kansas, who comes to Wall Street to fulfill what she feels is a kind of her destiny, her lifelong dream of working in finance. And the narrative really is about what she's willing to sacrifice to achieve her dream and how she fights for it, the risks that she takes, and who she brings down. I'm trying not to give any spoilers. Who she becomes, who she brings down in the process.
And how her ambition and her drive to succeed transforms her throughout that journey.
It's interesting that the kind of aim is Wall Street, because that kind of story, often you think about Hollywood and, you know, with yourselves being actors, this thing. So why set it on Wall Street? Why was that the place?
That's a fantastic question. I mean, our style is really informed by cinema. Our first show, The Man Who Thought He Knew Too Much, is essentially a pastiche of a film noir with lots of other cinematic influences thrown in. And so this, in a way, is a continuation of that work. It's inspired by Pixar, by Scorsese, by Wes Anderson. And so I suppose Wall Street, in a way, seemed like a really appropriate setting, given our style, but also, you know, I think when we think of Wall Street, we think of something that is relevant to all of our lives, but equally is this mystery. It's at a distance. And I think we see people who work in investment finance as, you know, driven by something that, I don't know, I think we see it as something dark, right? There's something that is
especially
almost...
those of us in the arts, it's almost the like antithesis of a lot of things that we stand for or believe in, at least from the outside. That's what it seems like. But I think what we're trying to do with the story is kind of like get to something that's at the core, that kind of like transcends whatever you do for a job, which is ambition and desire to be good at something, and desire to be seen and appreciated and valued like by society in whatever way that means, right? And that like takes on different forms and different professions, but at the heart of it, it's all about, everything is about people wanting to be appreciated and wanting to be loved. And so we're kind of like pulling out a human side of that story. There's also like a lot of inherent drama in the world of Wall Street, right? Like the stakes are so high, and there's a lot to lose, there's a lot to gain, there's a lot of pressure. The way that like time functions is very interesting and very pressurized as well. So it's very rich material to pull from in like a theatrical narrative as well.
And I was trying to think of films where Wall Street's at the heart of them, and they're nearly always dark and, you know, things are, you know, Wolf of Wall Street itself, and they did a follow-up, I'm sure, to that. But yeah, you know, the whole greed is good, and the, you know, the destruction of in Wolf of Wall Street, of one man kind of falling apart. It is dramatic, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And would you, and that idea that someone wants to be involved in that world, I think, you know, kind of already has an audience thinking, wow, who is this person?
Sure. But I think it taps into desires that are at the heart of all of us. They're just manifested in different ways. And I think, as you mentioned, Olivia, like, you know, it's something that banking the world of finance seems very distant to us in the arts. And often I think it's kind of an institution that we feel like we stand against as artists. But equally, I think that if we dig a little deeper, you know, what we feel and what we want, everyone's pushing for the same thing, just in different ways. And I think it's a very humanizing story in that respect.
Everyone lives the same story, I think, in a lot of ways.
And also in terms of theatre, it seems that physical theatre is at the heart of what you do. And there's also this idea, I think, when people think of Wall Street, certainly the ideas of those scenes where people are buying and selling, there's a real physicality to that as well. Is that something you wanted to capture and bring out?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think in a way, while like Wall Street is certainly like the setting and the backdrop of the story, really what it is the story of one woman, and it's very psychological in a lot of ways, because we're really trying to physicalize her emotional journey, her desires, her disappointments, her successes and her failures. So in a way, it's actually the like emotional stakes and the emotional reality of what she's experiencing in this setting that we are mostly working to physicalize. But of course, like there's such exciting and captivating imagery on Wall Street, even just thinking about New York and the pace of the city, the subway, the skyscrapers, the grit, the feel, like the texture of that whole world is something that we absolutely are working to like physicalize and capture.
There's something very, very theatrical about like the East Coast in general, I think. I mean, maybe it's different for you, but when I was in New York, Vermont, even like this, which is where it lives from, the scale of everything seems so different. It almost seems like you're living a life that is in itself exoticized, in itself like theatrical. And so in that respect, I think it seems really appropriate. People are larger than life. Yeah.
You know, I hadn't thought about that, but the setting of New York itself it's a character in itself, isn't it? And absolutely, it brings all sorts of things with it.
Yeah,
it's rhythms, it's sounds. Yeah.
So in terms of what can people expect when they come in as to be part of the audience, what they're going to kind of experience on stage?
Everything. I mean, no, but really. So, I mean, in this piece, we wanted to like kind of depart in a way, not depart, but like build on and stretch ourselves. Yeah. So the Man Who, our first show, is also like fast-paced, comedic with live music. And this and is cinematically inspired, and this has those same sort of like benchmarks. It's very fast paced. There's live music. It's comedic, but it's also a thriller, and there's also like some elements of tragedy in it. So I think what we're really hoping to do is allow audiences through the journey of Jess to experience the full range of human emotion, from like the highest highs to the lowest lows. Yeah, go ahead.
It really does run the gamut of emotions. It's a little bit like if you took the love child of Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Big Short, and what's another good reference point? Kind of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, in a way. Yeah. Why not? Yeah. So I think it's really eclectic. It's very fast paced. Everything's very episodic. It's like a Netflix thriller.
It's like a thriller, but it's like silly.
On stage.
It's silly and poignant. And it's very fast moving. Yeah, it really is like the experience of watching a movie.
Yeah.
In the pace of the transitions, in the way that we approach dialogue, just like much snappier and shorter, and in the compass, I guess it's like over 5 years. The story spans 5 years.
I think our style as well allows us to go to places that you couldn't represent in a realistic way. You couldn't conceivably represent it, and because we use our bodies with a few kind of well-chosen props, I hope they're well-chosen, it allows us to snap from location to location in the blink of an eye, and a lot of it demands the audience's participation imaginatively as well. We give the cues and the audience imagine something. It's almost like they build the world visually for themselves.
It's as if we're presenting a film that is black and white, and then it's like, as you watch a film that's black and white, you fill in the color yourself. You forget that you're watching something that's black and white. And what's exciting about that is that like audience members will all have a slightly different experience, because they're going to fill in the color differently based on their past experiences, based on whatever they relate to or don't relate to, or what they want to put onto the narrative. So there's a range of experiences.
And how do you get something which is so cinematic onto the stage? What's the kind of process? Do you start with a script and then work from there? How does it work?
It's the opposite. So we actually script last.
Right.
Yeah, so we're very, very much focused on the visual aspects of it. So what we do with this show, and our process is still constantly evolving, we're figuring out the best way to make shows like this, because it is sort of a non-traditional style of theater that puts the visual aspects first. So we kind of storyboard and we think about what we want the journey, the overall arc and the overall journey of the show to be. And then we kind of jump right in and we start making images and we start thinking, okay, so what does New York look like? How does that feel like? How can we transpose? There's like famous New York montages in a lot of films. So we'll watch those and say, okay, so how can we transpose those into our language of physical theater? And we sort of build from there. And often what we do is we actually have image by image, we'll have the whole show before we start, and we'll have a sense of who the characters are, but we'll do that before we start actually scripting and actually creating the dialogue. So it's actually the last thing to fall into place. And that's because ideally we want the story to be understood on some level, even if there was no text. The text in this show is very important, and we've spent a lot of time trying to choose words that are evocative and powerful and really kind of get to the heart of what we're trying to say. But at the same time, they're not of the utmost importance. We really, really want people to go on a visual journey, and we're hoping that the emotions and the stakes can be communicated through our bodies and the shapes and the images that we make.
That's a really interesting way of working. And in terms of the Voloz collective, how does that work? Because I noticed all four of you have equal crediting as performer, writer, and all of that. Is that really important, that this is how it works? It is a proper collective.
Absolutely, that's at the heart of it. We're completely non-hierarchical, so we all have equal stake in writing, in devising, in performing, producing, directing. We all have different strengths, I think, and different departments that we naturally gravitate towards, but we all have a say in everything, which makes the process, I think, a little longer, a little slower, but we're all equally pulling in different directions. And I think that creates a really rich fabric at the heart of the show. We all have different things that we prioritize consciously or unconsciously, artistically, and in the stories that we're telling. And I think that's partly what makes the work so human. It's that we all have slightly different backgrounds and we all want to bring those to the fore. It's really fulfilling and really enriching. Yeah, and
I think it's important for us in a way to resist this like hyper specialization that is really, in a lot of ways, necessary in like today's world, right? You have to like find a niche and be really good at that one thing. But for us in Voloz, like we really want to resist that. And as Sam is saying, that it makes it so much richer that we all are able to equally contribute to different aspects of the development of every show.
And that obviously involves a lot of trust between you as well. So that build, if you're all involved, I guess, by the time it gets to the final show, you're all, rooting for not just the show, but each other's too.
Sorry, what was that?
So you're all kind of pulling in the same direction for the show. No one is saying, well, I think there should be more of my script in there, or no one is saying that everyone's feeling the same thing, that you've got to the final show together.
Yeah. I think we're all really good generally at kind of putting ego aside and saying, no, actually this is what's best for the story. And we've had that experience in creating this show as well, that there are moments that you feel are very precious when you're performing them and you think, oh, that feels nice. Yeah, that has to make it in. And you end up it ends up on the cutting room floor because you think, that's not the story we're telling, or that takes a moment too long. And it does create this real equal investment. And we're all, I think, equally invested in each other's performance. And, to have 3-4 sets of eyes on every moment, that's a beautiful thing, I think. And I think it improves the quality no end as well. 4 people checking the quality and the fluidity of the final product, rather than one which would be conventional.
It does mean that when we're doing that, obviously whoever's watching to check quality or to see if an image works, you have to imagine yourself in it, right? Because we're just 4. So it's also quite an interesting exercise for us in our own like imaginative abilities to see an image and to say, okay, I'm here and I'm here and I'm here. And in a way that helps us put ourselves in the perspective of the audience as well, because we understand what we're asking of them. Of course, we're asking of ourselves a lot more because we're watching an image without one person. But if we're able to understand it, given that, then we say, okay, then hopefully like this must be okay for an audience.
And we should tell people where the audiences can come and see you and at what time. Where is it this year?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the first show, The Man Who Thought He Knew Too Much, is at 12:10 at Pleasance Fourth, which is in the courtyard. And then The Life Sporadic of Jess Wildgoose, the show we've been speaking about today, is at 2:25 at Pleasance Above, which is also in the courtyard.
And you've done the Fringe before, haven't you? You've been, yeah. So what are your experiences of you? You know, what do you feel about, you know, Edinburgh in August, which can be quite challenging, and you're doing 2 shows, even more challenging.
Yeah, it's a thrill. It's a thrill. I think we were very lucky last year. We sold out all of our shows. Very generous of the audiences. I think to put their trust in a company that at the time as well hadn't done a Fringe together before.
It was our debut show as well.
We got a terrific response there, and that was The Man Who, which we're bringing back. The Edinburgh was very, performing was very sweaty, and I think this year it's going to be even sweatier with 2 shows. But it's a wonderful, wonderful ambience. The culture of sharing, and you meet people on the mile or wherever you're flyering, and you go and see their shows. You exchange flyers. I think there's a brilliant kind of camaraderie that comes out of it, and yeah, it really does feel like a genuine sharing.
Yeah. It's electric.
Nice. Yeah,
the energy there is electric. There's so many people, like the product of a whole year of work is there at this one time, this 1 month. It's so alive and so vibrant and exciting to be a part of that.
It'll be interesting to see how it's different this year as well, because last year, the first proper Fringe after COVID as well, it felt like people were, bringing out like 3 years of work that they hadn't been able to show. So it'll be really interesting to see how it's changed, how it's developed this year too.
Yeah, and last year there was also just a lot of uncertainty about what the audiences would be like. So that was definitely played part of our concerns going into it, just because there's so many unknown factors. And this year is a little bit different because we saw, okay, people are ready to go to the theater again. People are excited about seeing work. So that, it'll be interesting to see how audiences are different now that COVID is a little bit further in the past, although still obviously present in a lot of people's minds.
Just the consistency in the tradition is beautiful as well. I first did the Fringe about 10 years ago, maybe more. And sure, it's changed, it's expanded, but equally, you're like, oh, that's where that happened. And it's beautiful, the kind of consistency of it and how things have changed in a way, but equally remain the same. Yeah.
I think that's right. And I think in terms of audiences, certainly my experience, the Fringe last year was the first time I'd been in a theatre space, a sold out theatre space, cheek by jowl with the person beside me and all of that. And there still was a little bit of like, oh, we've not been allowed to do this. Having gone out to now many gigs and lots of theatre, I think people really are just, I'm hoping you'll just get full audience experience once again.
Yeah, hopefully. Exciting.
Crossed, yeah.
Well, Olivia and Sam, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, and all the very best with this year's Edinburgh and beyond.
Thank you.
Thanks Alistair. It's been a pleasure.